Welcome! I'm Esther Buerki, the author of Living Without Fear and the co-publisher of the Amazon best-selling Inspired Journeys. Get in touch with me if you want to start living without fear or writing your book. And please share this podcast with a friend who you know needs to hear this episode. And subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're listening now on a podcast platform, you can do me a great favor by writing a short review or rate it with a lot of stars if you enjoyed it. And I cannot believe it. I have already people from 71 countries who have been listening to Living Without Fear. Isn't this amazing? Today, I'd like to talk about the emotional home. A thing I learned from Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker from the US. He uses it for the usual state you're in when it comes to your emotions. Some people have, for example, worrying as their emotional home. They always come back to worry about things. Others have fear as their emotional home. Whenever they want to do something, they feel this fear. When I heard about it from Tony Robbins the first time, I realized that I took over the same emotional home that my parents have. It was hopelessness. I had done so much psychotherapy in all the past decades, but this feeling that everything was hopeless always came up when I was again at the bottom of my life, always triggered by different situations, such as a broken relationship, being laid off at work, the divorce, or being totally broke, to name some triggers of them. I always felt the same way. There is no use to do anything. There is no hope to change the situation. And I always ended up with suicidal thoughts. Recently, my 80-year-old father gave me his handwritten memoirs to read and to type it into a document. I want to do him this favor. I'm not done yet because he describes so many passages of his life that it will be a more than 100 pages document. Typing his memoirs made me immerse in his life, his thoughts and feelings, and I realized how deep I got into his feelings. The more time I spent with his memoirs, the more I got into this feeling of hopelessness. And I also encountered shame, a feeling I often had during my childhood because my parents often made me feel ashamed for things I did. I haven't felt shame for a long time because with my psychotherapists, I had worked on the right to be me, to do what I love, and be totally okay this way. But the feeling of hopelessness was the strongest, and I saw how much this feeling had dominated his life and that of my mother. My father wrote that all he and my mother did to have a good relationship with their children, my brother and me, was hopeless, and therefore they gave up. And they often show this kind of bitterness that many old people have. It's so sad. My effort during the past years was to show them that they had done what they could for my brother and me, and they could not have done different, and it has been their best. I mentioned this also in my book, Living Without Fear, which they both read. And I think that they feel now that I really mean it by spending a lot of time with them and talking to them. Coming back to the emotional home, it's obvious that since generations, my family had lived with this hopelessness. They experienced war times and suffered a lot. But when the war got over, they couldn't change their emotional home. It stayed. And I remember clearly that I always had this fear in my own life that when something went well, it could change and some new bad thing would happen to my life or to the life of my children. The fear that they could get sick, severely sick, always came up when I was exhausted and not feeling safe. Does something of all this resonate with your life? What emotional home do you have? What emotional home do your parents have? Or if they are already gone, what do you think did they have? What helped me to get rid again of this feeling of hopelessness, of shame, and of not having the right to have a good life, to get away from all those negative feelings triggered by reading and typing my father's memoirs, was to clearly identify as my parents' feelings and of telling myself, you have the right to feel different. You don't have to live your parents' life. You have the right to feel joy, peace, and success in your life. You have the right to do what you love to do. You don't have to repeat your parents' life. You have a choice. You can choose to change your emotional home into something positive. You can bring in as much love in your life, as much peace, and you are allowed to feel whole, perfect, and being at the right place. And you can decide every day which emotions you want to feel. Do you want to feed fear, or do you want to feed joy? Do you want to have more love, or do you stick with the bitterness your parents showed you? And all those daily decisions are life-changing. It fills my heart with joy and love. Hopelessness belongs to the past. Hopelessness belongs to all the generations that have lived before me. Hopelessness can be replaced by hope that I'm able to create my own life, a life full of beautiful memories. And this is what I want to pass on to my 2 sons. If you haven't thought about what you pass on to the people living around you, it's a thing I'd like to recommend you. Thank you, dear listener, for spending your time with me and reflecting on your emotional home and make changes if necessary. And I cannot repeat it enough. In case you feel worthless and nobody seems to like you, I tell you, you're amazing. I love you, and the world needs you. And please don't stop telling yourself these sentences. Have an amazing day and talk to you next time.